They said he had everything: power, money, a mansion that overlooked the sea. But behind those walls, Min-soo's heart was colder than winter. And then came Jasmine, a woman with nothing but hope in her suitcase and fire in her soul. She wasn't just the nanny he hired. She was the storm that would break down his walls, and the light that would change everything. This is their story, not just a nanny. Rain poured down as Jasmine stepped out of the cab. Her shoes splashed against puddles as she stared at the mansion that seemed to scrape the clouds. It was beautiful and terrifying. She clutched her old handbag close. Every coin she had left was gone after that flight from Lagos to Seoul. This job was her last chance. Before she could even knock, the massive door opened. A small Korean girl peeked out, bright eyes, shy smile, and hair tied in two perfect braids. Jasmine knelt down, smiling gently. "Hi there. You must be Hye-Ji." The little girl nodded, still shy. Before Jasmine could say another word, a deep voice echoed from the hall. "Keep the introductions short. Dinner's at 7. She turned and saw him. Min-soo. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her rent for a year. His eyes were sharp, unreadable. His expression, cold as marble. Jasmine lowered her gaze politely. "Yes, sir." But something in the way he looked at her, as though she were a problem to be managed, not a person, made her chest tighten. She didn't know it yet, but behind that distant stare lived a man haunted by guilt and grief. The first week was brutal. Everything in the mansion had rules: the time breakfast must be served, the brand of tea used, even the exact temperature of the bathwater. And Min-soo was the kind of man who noticed everything. He barely spoke to her, except to issue instructions. But Jasmine wasn't the kind of woman to be intimidated. She kept her head high, her smile soft, and her heart steady. Still, she noticed things. Like how little Hye-Ji flinched at sudden sounds. How her laughter never seemed to reach her eyes. One night, Jasmine heard whimpering from the little girl's room. A nightmare. She rushed in, gathered Hye-Ji in her arms, and began to hum softly, an old lullaby her mother used to sing. Moments later, Min-soo appeared at the doorway. He froze. The moonlight framed the two, Jasmine cradling the child with warmth he hadn't seen in years. Something inside him stirred. For the first time in a long time, the mansion didn't feel so empty. But he hid it quickly, clearing his throat. "You can go back to your room now," he said stiffly. Jasmine looked up, her voice gentle. She was scared. He hesitated, then turned away. "Good night," he murmured, softer than before. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the coldness began to melt. Jasmine's laughter filled the halls. She taught Hye-Ji songs from home, how to dance, how to cook jollof rice. She made the child laugh, loud and unrestrained. And every time Min-soo heard that laughter, something inside him cracked open. One morning, Hye-Ji refused to eat breakfast until her uncle joined them. It was the first time in months Min-soo sat at that table. Jasmine poured his tea without a word. The silence was awkward, but comforting. And when he looked up, catching her small smile, his heartbeat faltered. A feeling he hadn't experienced since before the tragedy. That night, while cleaning the study, Jasmine found a sketchbook. Inside were drawings, Hye-Ji as a baby, a woman holding her, and a smiling Min-soo beside them. The woman's eyes mirrored Hye-Ji's eyes. His sister. The child's late mother. Jasmine closed the book softly, realizing the truth. It wasn't arrogance that made him cold. It was loss. And guilt that refused to let him breathe. Just when the walls were starting to crumble, someone returned. Yuna. Min-soo's ex-fiancé. Elegant. Calculated. And furious that another woman stood where she once ruled. When she saw Jasmine greeting her at the door, her lips curved into a poisonous smile. "So this is the new help?" she asked mockingly. "She's different." Jasmine simply bowed politely. "Nice to meet you." But Yuna wasn't interested in niceties. She saw the way Min-soo looked at Jasmine, not like staff, but like something he couldn't admit he needed. And that made her dangerous. Within days, she began to whisper, to shareholders, to the press. Rumors spread that Min-soo had become distracted by the nanny. Min-soo tried to ignore it, but the pressure mounted. And through it all, Jasmine stayed silent, enduring the stares, the whispers, the cruel glances from the woman who wanted her gone. Despite everything, the bond between Jasmine, Hye-Ji, and Min-soo deepened. One evening, cherry blossoms painted the streets pink. They walked together after dinner, Hye-Ji running ahead with a balloon. Min-soo turned to Jasmine, his voice low. "I haven't heard her laugh like this since my sister died." Jasmine smiled softly. "That's because she feels loved again." He looked at her, really looked. Her strength, her kindness, her quiet resilience. "And what about you, Jasmine?" he asked. "Do you feel loved?" Her eyes flickered down. "That's not part of my job description, sir." But her trembling voice told another story. The next week shattered everything. A missing jewelry box, a phone call to the police, and Yuncha's voice, calm and cruel, "I'm afraid your nanny's been stealing." When officers arrived, they found the jewelry in Jasmine's drawer. She stood frozen, shaking her head in disbelief. "I didn't. I swear I didn't." Min-soo's jaw tightened. His heart screamed her innocence, but fear whispered louder. "You're fired," he said quietly. Tears filled Jasmine's eyes. "I thought you trusted me." He didn't answer, and that silence broke her more than words ever could. She left that night, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness she once filled with laughter. Hye-Ji cried until her voice gave out. And Min-soo realized too late. The house was colder than ever before. Weeks passed. Until one evening, a maid came forward, trembling, guilty, desperate. She confessed. Yuna had bribed her to plant the jewelry. Min-soo watched the security footage, his stomach twisting. The truth hit him like a blow. He had thrown away the only person who ever made his world feel human again. He didn't wait. He left everything behind, the company, the meetings, the noise, and searched for her. He found Jasmine in a small daycare on the city's edge, surrounded by children's laughter. When she saw him standing at the door, her smile faded. "What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," he said softly. "You were right. I didn't trust you. Because I didn't trust myself." She crossed her arms, guarding her heart. "And what makes you think I can forgive that?" He stepped closer. "Because you're the only one who saw me as more than a name, more than a paycheck. You saw me." Silence hung between them, thick with all the things left unsaid. Then, softly, she whispered, "You broke something I can't fix overnight." "I know," he said, "but I'll spend the rest of my life trying." Months later, laughter returned to the mansion. Hye-Ji ran across the garden, her giggles echoing like sunlight. Min-soo watched as Jasmine chased her through the blossoms, both of them glowing with joy. She wasn't the nanny anymore. She was home. As they sat together that evening, the sky painted in gold and rose, Jasmine leaned into him. "You're staring again," she teased. He smiled. "Can you blame me? You're the reason this place feels alive again." She laughed softly. "Then promise me something." "Anything." "Never hire another nanny." He chuckled. "Never will. Because the woman I love isn't just a nanny." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of them stood hand in hand before the mansion. A family forged not by blood, but by love, forgiveness, and second chances. And for the first time in years, Min-soo's heart was warm. Because Jasmine didn't just care for his niece. She cared for him. And that changed everything. Love doesn't always come from where you expect. Sometimes, it walks through your door wearing a nanny's uniform.